Hey, warriors. Are you ready for a journey from pride to partnership? From the ashes of dominance to the forge of true equality? Tonight, we're diving deep into a world where bloodlines determine destiny, where ancient warrior codes hold deadly consequences, and where sometimes the strongest alphas are the ones who learn that power means nothing without respect. I need you to buckle up because we're about to meet Kira Stormborne, a princess whose refusal to kneel is about to shatter kingdoms and rewrite the rules of power itself. But here's what I want you to remember as we begin. Sometimes we have to lose everything to discover that strength isn't about who kneels lowest. It's about who stands tallest together. Let's finish this together. Then let's step into the obsidian throne room on the night that changed everything. Chapter 1. The war banners hung like blood-soaked shadows in the great hall of the obsidian keep, each one representing a kingdom conquered, a people subjugated, a throne claimed by force. Princess Kira Stormborne stood before the largest throne she'd ever seen, carved from black stone and decorated with the weapons of fallen enemies, and tried to steady her racing heart. Tonight was supposed to be the night, the political marriage that would unite the northern and southern kingdoms, the alliance that would end 3 generations of border wars, the partnership that would finally bring peace to lands soaked in blood. She smoothed down her ceremonial armor. Not a dress, never a dress. The silver plates that had been worn by her mother and her mother's mother before that. The ancient metal whispered against her skin like a promise. Around her, courtiers gathered in their finest clothes, their excited chatter filling the vast hall with anticipation. Kira, the deep voice made her turn, and there he was. Theron Blackclaw in all his devastating glory. 6'5" of pure alpha dominance, with jet black hair that fell to his shoulders and those piercing gold eyes that had haunted battlefields for a decade. The conqueror king. The undefeated alpha. The man she was supposed to marry. Your Majesty, she said, keeping her voice formal. This was a political arrangement, nothing more. She'd known that from the beginning. He stepped toward her, and every instinct she had screamed at her to step back. Not from fear. Kira Stormborne feared nothing, but from the sheer, overwhelming presence of him. Theron Blackclaw didn't just enter rooms. He consumed them. We have an issue to address, he said, his voice carrying easily across the hall. Before the ceremony. Of course. Kira forced herself to remain still. Pre-ceremony protocol. I understand. Kneel. The single word hit her like a war hammer to the chest. Around them, the court began to form the traditional ceremony circle. Theron's father, the former king, stood at the center with the ancient crown while nobles offered Kira smiles that suddenly felt predatory. I'm sorry. Her voice came out colder than she intended. What did you say? Kneel, Theron repeated, gesturing to the ground before his throne. Before we unite our kingdoms, you must acknowledge the hierarchy. You will be my queen, yes. But I will be your king, your alpha, your superior in all things. The ceremonial circle continued forming around them, but suddenly everything felt distant, muffled, like she was drowning. You want me to kneel, she repeated slowly. To submit, to acknowledge you as my superior. It's tradition, he said, and for just a moment she saw something flicker across his features. Doubt, maybe? But then his expression hardened into something carved from the same stone as his throne. The Blackclaw line has ruled through strength for 5 centuries. My queen must demonstrate her acceptance of my authority. The throne room tilted sideways. Kira's knees locked, her warrior's stance keeping her upright. Around them, courtiers began to notice something was wrong. Whispers started, confused murmurs rippling through the gathered nobles. No. The single word rang through the hall like a bell, clear and unmistakable. Theron's jaw tightened. Excuse me. I said no. Kira lifted her chin, and every inch of Stormborne pride blazed in her gray eyes. I am a princess of the Storm Kingdoms, daughter of warriors, heir to a lineage that has never bowed. I will stand beside you as an equal, or I will not stand with you at all. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's mother whispered a prayer to the old gods. The former king's face darkened with what looked like rage. You would throw away peace because of pride, Theron demanded. Our marriage ends decades of war. Your refusal dooms thousands to continued bloodshed. My refusal, Kira said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, saves thousands from a future where strength is measured by submission rather than partnership. She turned to face the assembled court. Nobles who'd traveled from both kingdoms, warriors who'd fought on both sides, people who'd lost everything to the endless wars. King Theron Blackclaw has asked me to kneel before him as proof of my worthiness to be his queen, to demonstrate that I understand my place beneath him. More gasps. The former king stepped forward, his face purple with barely contained fury. "But I am Kira Stormborne," she continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "And the Stormborne line does not kneel. Not to conquerors. Not to kings. Not to alphas who measure worth by who bows lowest." Theron finally met her eyes, and for just a second, she saw the man beneath the crown. The boy who'd been raised to believe that mercy was weakness, that partnership meant losing control, that true alphas never bent. But then his mask slipped back into place. "Then you are refusing the marriage alliance." "I'm refusing a partnership based on subjugation," Kira corrected. "I came here ready to rule beside you. But if ruling beside you means kneeling before you, then yes, I refuse." She stripped off the ceremonial crown that had been placed on her head during the pre-ceremony preparations, letting it fall to the polished stone floor with a ringing clang that seemed to echo forever. "Find yourself a queen who will kneel, King Theron. Find yourself a partner who believes that submission equals strength. Find yourself someone who will be grateful for the honor of standing in your shadow." She turned toward the massive doors, every eye in the hall fixed on her. Her heart was breaking. Not for Theron, they barely knew each other, but for the peace that was slipping away with every step. "But know this," she called back over her shoulder. "The Storm Kingdoms will never accept a treaty built on the degradation of our princess. You want alliance? You want partnership? You want peace?" She paused at the threshold, framed by torchlight and her own stubborn determination. Then learned to see strength in standing beside someone, not standing over them. The doors slammed shut behind her with a finality that seemed to shake the very foundations of the keep. Behind her, she heard Theron call her name. But Kira Stormborne was done listening to voices that told her that strength meant submission. She ran through the corridors of the obsidian keep, her armor clanking, her heart breaking. She ran until she reached the stables, mounted her warhorse without ceremony, and rode Helfer leather into the night. She rode until her horse was lathered and exhausted, until the familiar spires of the northern kingdom faded behind her, until she crossed into the disputed borderlands that stretched between territories. She rode until she couldn't ride anymore, then collapsed beside a moonlit river and let herself finally truly break. But even as she cried for her lost hope, her shattered dreams of peace, her uncertain future, a small flame of defiance burned in her chest. She was Kira Stormborne, daughter of warriors, keeper of her people's pride. Her lineage might be smaller than the mighty Blackclaw Empire, but it was ancient. There were stories in her family line about strength that didn't require subjugation, about leaders who inspired rather than intimidated. Theron Blackclaw thought she was too proud to kneel. She'd show him. She'd show them all that pride was just another word for self-respect, and that true strength didn't require breaking others. But first, she had to survive the night alone in territory she'd never seen before, with the sounds of wolves howling in the distance, and the very real possibility that war would come because she'd chosen pride over peace. Chapter 2. Dawn was still hours away when Kira finally lifted her head from her knees. The river bubbled softly beside her, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called to its mate, a sound that sent a fresh spike of loneliness through her chest. She'd cried herself empty beside this river, her tears mixing with the water that reflected the waning moon. But now, as the initial shock began to fade, reality crept in with cold fingers. She was alone, truly alone, in disputed territory, wearing ceremonial armor that marked her as northern royalty, with no backup and no clear path home. Her horse whickered softly, and Kira forced herself to stand. The animal needed water and rest, and wallowing in self-pity wouldn't change what had happened. "Okay, Kira," she whispered to herself. "You wanted to prove that pride matters more than politics. Time to figure out how to survive the consequences." She led her horse to drink, then followed the river deeper into the borderlands. The forests here felt different from home. Wilder somehow, with trees so massive their trunks could hide entire armies. Then she caught the scent. Smoke, cooking meat, people, clothes. Heart hammering, Kira reached for the sword at her hip. She was exhausted and heartbroken, but she was still a warrior. Still trained. Still dangerous. A group of armed warriors stepped out of the shadows. 6 of them, all tall and powerfully built, wearing the colors she'd been taught to recognize since childhood. Southern Kingdom Scouts. Enemy territory. Well, the leader said, a striking woman with red hair and scars across her knuckles. What do we have here? A northern princess in ceremonial armor, crying alone in the borderlands. Kira lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness. I'm passing through. I don't want trouble. Passing through to where? A blonde warrior with kind eyes, but a fighter's stance exchanged looks with his companions. Your kingdoms are preparing for war because you refused King Theron's marriage proposal. How do you already know about that? Kira demanded. Messenger birds fly fast, the red-haired woman said. Not unkindly. I'm Sarah. These are my patrol. And you are walking into territory that's about to become very hostile to northern royalty. Former royalty, Kira corrected, surprised by how much the words hurt. As of about 6 hours ago, they all exchanged loaded glances. Refusing a political marriage to preserve your dignity, Sarah said slowly. That took courage. Or stupidity, Kira muttered. I may have just doomed thousands because I wouldn't kneel. Or saved thousands from a treaty built on humiliation. The voice came from behind her, and Kira spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a man who made King Theron look almost ordinary. Tall and broad-shouldered with silver-white hair that seemed to glow in the pre-dawn light, and eyes so dark blue, they looked like pieces of the ocean. But it wasn't just his physical presence that made her warrior instincts snap to attention. It was the power rolling off him in waves. This man was an alpha, and not just any alpha. This was an alpha in his prime, radiating the kind of authority that made lesser warriors instinctively step aside. Prince Calder, Sarah said immediately, dropping into a respectful posture. We found her by the river. I know exactly who she is. Those midnight eyes fixed on Kira with an intensity that made her skin burn. Princess Kira Stormborne, the woman who told my cousin to go to hell. Your cousin? Kira's mind raced through political connections she'd memorized. You're Theron's, but you're from the Southern Kingdom. My mother was Blackclaw. Calder moved closer, and she caught his scent, salt and leather and something wild that made her mouth go dry. My father was Southron. I'm what you might call a bridge between territories, or a traitor to both, depending on who you ask. He stopped a few feet away, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. So tell me, princess, was it worth it? Throwing away peace because you couldn't swallow your pride for 30 seconds. The words hit like arrows, finding every doubt she'd been nursing since her dramatic exit. I didn't throw away peace, Kira snapped, exhaustion making her reckless. I refused to build it on subjugation. Subjugation. Calder repeated the word like he was tasting it. Is that what you call tradition? Protocol? The acknowledgement of authority that every queen in Blackclaw history has performed. I call it exactly what it is, Kira shot back. A ritual designed to remind women that no matter how powerful they are, no matter what they bring to a partnership, they'll always be beneath the men they marry. Something flickered in his ocean-dark eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or consideration. And if that ritual is required for peace? If thousands will die because you couldn't bend? Then maybe, Kira said, her voice shaking with emotion and conviction. Those thousands deserved a better foundation for peace than watching their princess grovel. The silence that followed was absolute. The patrol warriors looked between Calder and Kira like they were watching a duel fought with words instead of swords. Then Calder laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rich and genuine and completely unexpected. My cousin, he said, still grinning, is an even bigger fool than I thought. Kira blinked, thrown completely off balance. What? He had a warrior princess willing to unite kingdoms, and he tried to break her spirit before they even took vows. Calder shook his head in what looked like genuine amazement. The Blackclaw pride always was more important than Blackclaw sense. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his blue eyes. Tell me, Princess Stormborne, what do you know about your great-great-grandmother? The one they called the Shield Maiden. Kira's breath caught. Her great-great-grandmother Astrid had been legendary. A warrior who defended the Northern Kingdom against impossible odds, who'd led armies and inspired generations. My grandmother used to tell stories, but they were just stories, tales to make children feel brave. Were they? His hand reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped just short. Your ancestor Astrid Stormborne held the Northern Pass against 5,000 warriors with only 500 defenders. She did it through strategy, through inspiring absolute loyalty, through being the kind of leader people would die for. The world tilted, but this time it wasn't from heartbreak. It was from the sudden, overwhelming sense that she was being seen, really seen, for the first time since her mother died. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Calder said quietly, "I've spent 10 years watching my cousin conquer kingdoms through force. And I've spent those same 10 years wondering what the world would look like if we had leaders like Astrid Stormborne again. Leaders who inspire rather than intimidate." He gestured to the patrol surrounding them. "These warriors? They follow me not because I demand obedience, but because I've earned their loyalty. Because I stand beside them in battle instead of sending them to die while I watch from safety." Kira looked around at the 6 warriors watching their prince with obvious respect and affection. She thought about Theron, about his demand for submission, about courtiers who smiled while preparing to watch her humiliation. She thought about her own people, about the warriors who'd trained her, about the mother who'd taught her that leadership meant service, not dominance. "What are you suggesting?" she asked carefully. "I'm suggesting," Calder said, his voice dropping to something almost intimate, "that maybe the Storm Kingdoms and the Southern Territories have more in common than either of us have with Theron's empire of subjugation. An alliance," she breathed. "Between our people." "A partnership," he corrected. "Between equals." The words sent a thrill through her that probably should have been concerning. She'd just fled one political marriage. The last thing she needed was to be entangled in another alliance with someone she'd just met. But standing here, surrounded by warriors who looked at their prince with respect rather than fear, Kira found herself wanting to hear more. "I'll need to send word to my father," she said. "The Storm Council will need to approve any formal alliance." "Of course." Calder smiled, and it was nothing like Theron's predatory grins. This was warm, genuine, full of possibility. "But in the meantime, you need rest, food, and probably a change of armor. That ceremonial stuff is beautiful, but terrible for actual fighting. You're offering me sanctuary. I'm offering you a chance to rest and recover while we figure out how to prevent the war my cousin is probably already planning." His eyes turned serious. "Because make no mistake, Princess. Theron doesn't handle rejection well. He's going to come after you, and when he does, you'll need allies." Sarah stepped forward. "The Southern Territories are 3 days' ride from here, but we have a forward camp nearby. Safe, secure, and definitely more comfortable than sleeping beside rivers." Kira looked at these strangers who should have been enemies, offering help when her own people, her own intended husband, had demanded her pride as payment for peace. "I have conditions," she said finally. Calder raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to make demands." "Aren't I?" She gestured to herself, still armed, still dangerous despite her exhaustion. "You want my alliance? You want my people's support? You want a partnership between our territories? Then prove to me that the Southern Territories are different from the Blackclaw Empire. Prove that your word partnership means what mine does. That I won't be trading one cage for another." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, definitely. But also something warmer, more personal. "Fair enough," he said quietly. "Welcome to the Southern Territories, Princess Kira Stormborne. Let's build something better than what either of our kingdoms has known before." As they walked toward the camp, Sarah fell into step beside her. "He's different from his cousin," she said quietly. "Everything Theron does through force and fear, Calder does through respect and loyalty. Give him a chance. Give us a chance. I think you'll be surprised." Kira looked ahead at the prince who'd offered partnership instead of submission, alliance instead of conquest. Theron had called her too proud to kneel, had demanded she prove her worth through subjugation. But standing here with potential allies who saw strength as something to celebrate rather than crush, Kira Stormborne was beginning to suspect that her refusal had led her exactly where she needed to be. The only question was, could a princess raised to never bow learn to trust an alpha who claimed he'd never ask her to? Chapter 3. Kira woke to the smell of pine smoke and bread baking, scents so different from the rose water and honey that had filled her chambers in the northern keep that for a moment she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back like ice water to the face. The refusal, the flight, the impossible encounter with an enemy prince who'd offered everything Theron hadn't. She sat up in the narrow cot, taking in her surroundings by morning light. Sarah had brought her to a well-organized military camp on the edge of Southern Territory. Not a palace, but not prison either. A place for warriors who valued function over decoration. "Morning, Princess," Sarah's voice carried warmth and something that might have been approval. Prince Calder wants to see you at the training grounds. Says if you're going to be here, you might as well make yourself useful. Make herself useful. The phrase made Kira smile. After a lifetime of being told she was too aggressive, too martial, too unwilling to play the delicate princess, it was refreshing to be somewhere that saw her fighting skills as an asset. She splashed cold water on her face, braided her hair into her usual warrior's queue, and followed Sarah toward the sounds of combat. The training grounds were a revelation. Warriors of every size and build sparred together. Men with women, larger fighters with smaller ones, veterans with fresh recruits. But what struck her most was the atmosphere. No one was trying to dominate. They were teaching, learning, growing stronger together. We train as units, Calder explained, appearing beside her with that unsettling habit of moving silently despite his size. Not as individuals trying to prove superiority. A warrior who can work with others is worth 10 who fight alone. He was dressed for training in leather pants and a simple tunic, his silver-white hair tied back to reveal the sharp angles of his face. In daylight, he was even more devastating than he'd been in the pre-dawn shadows. Is that a criticism? Kira asked, thinking of her own solitary training in the Northern Keep, where she'd learned to fight alone because other nobles' children weren't allowed to spar with royalty. It's an observation. His ocean-dark eyes studied her carefully. The Blackclaw way of training, and I assume the Stormborne way too, focuses on creating singular champions, warriors who can defeat any individual opponent. And your way creates teams that can't be broken, warriors who cover each other's weaknesses and amplify each other's strengths. He gestured toward the sparring grounds where a massive warrior was being systematically taken down by 3 smaller fighters working in perfect coordination. That's what wins wars, Princess. Not the strongest individual, but the most cohesive unit. Kira watched the demonstration with growing fascination. The large warrior had every physical advantage, reach, strength, experience. But the 3 smaller fighters moved like water around him, creating openings, supporting each other, thinking 3 moves ahead. You're saying I need to learn to fight with others. I'm saying, Calder corrected gently, that if we're going to build an alliance between our territories, we need to learn how to work together. And that starts here on the training grounds. He moved into the center of the practice area, and every fighter immediately stopped to attention. Not from fear, but from obvious respect. Warriors, Calder called out. We have a guest. Princess Kira Stormborne of the Northern Kingdom. Many of you know her reputation. She's been trained since childhood in the Northern style, focused on individual combat excellence. Kira felt heat creep up her neck, but she refused to look away. Today, Calder continued, she's going to help us demonstrate the difference between fighting alone and fighting together. Princess, would you join me? It wasn't really a request. Kira walked into the practice circle, feeling every eye on her. She'd proven herself in countless training bouts back home, had earned her warrior's rank through skill rather than birthright. But here, now, surrounded by southern warriors who had no reason to respect her, she felt suddenly vulnerable. Rules are simple, Calder explained as they took positions opposite each other. First to yield or be disarmed loses. No permanent damage, but we're not holding back. He tossed her a practice sword, which she caught easily. Show us what the Northern Kingdom's finest can do. They circled each other, and Kira fell into the familiar rhythm of combat assessment. He was taller, stronger, with longer reach. But she was faster, more agile, trained in techniques designed to bring down larger opponents. She struck first, fast and precise, aiming for his sword arm. He deflected with almost casual ease, his counterstrike coming so quickly she barely blocked it. They traded blows, each testing the other, and Kira felt a wild joy rising in her chest. This was real combat, not the choreographed demonstrations she'd performed for northern nobles. This was a warrior who respected her enough to actually try. But then everything changed. Calder made a subtle hand signal, and suddenly 2 more warriors entered the circle. Not attacking her, but moving to support Calder, covering his blind spots, creating openings, forcing her to defend against 3 directions at once. Kira fought brilliantly, her training showing as she held her own against impossible odds. But slowly, inevitably, the coordinated assault drove her back. One warrior feinted left while another struck right. Calder's blade found the opening, stopping just short of her throat. Yield? He asked quietly. Yes, she gasped, frustrated and impressed in equal measure. The warriors stepped back immediately, their aggressive postures melting into something almost apologetic. "You're incredible," Calder said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "Your technique is flawless, your instincts sharp, your courage undeniable. But I fight alone," Kira finished, understanding flooding through her. "And alone, even the strongest warrior can be overwhelmed." "Exactly." He extended his hand to help her up, and the gesture felt significant somehow. An alpha offering support instead of demonstrating dominance. She took his hand, feeling calluses that matched her own, warrior to warrior. "So teach me," she said. "Teach me how to fight your way." Something warm flickered in his eyes. "It's not just about fighting, Princess. It's about trust. About letting others cover your weaknesses and being willing to cover theirs. About putting the unit above your own glory." "That sounds like exactly what I need to learn," Kira said softly. "Because trying to do everything alone, trying to prove I was strong enough by myself. That's what led to me being in that throne room, refusing to kneel because I thought partnership meant losing strength." The training ground had gone very quiet, everyone clearly listening to their exchange. "Partnership doesn't mean losing strength," Calder said, his voice carrying across the grounds. "It means multiplying it. It means being strong enough to admit you can't do everything alone." He looked at the assembled warriors. "Pair up. I want Princess Kira to work with Sarah on coordinated defense patterns." Over the next hours, Kira learned a completely new way of fighting. With Sarah guarding her back, she discovered she could take risks she never dared before. With Ben and another warrior flanking her, she found her strikes became twice as effective because they created openings she couldn't have made alone. By mid-afternoon, she was exhausted, bruised, and happier than she'd been in months. "You're a natural at this," Sarah said, offering her a water skin. "Most highborn warriors struggle to trust others to watch their backs. Too much pride." "I had plenty of pride knocked out of me today," Kira admitted with a rueful smile. "But I see the value. This is how you've been fighting the border skirmishes, isn't it? Small coordinated units instead of large armies with clear command structures." "Exactly." Calder had appeared beside them again, somehow looking fresh despite having trained all morning. "The Blackclaw Empire fields massive armies led by singular champions. We field smaller, smarter forces that think as units." "It's brilliant," Kira said thoughtfully. "And if our kingdoms," she paused, correcting herself, "if our territories combine this approach with northern defensive strategies, we'd be unstoppable," Calder finished, and the excitement in his voice matched her own. Their eyes met across the training ground, and something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding, the beginning of something that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with seeing someone who thought the way you did. "Prince Calder." A scout burst into the training grounds, breathing hard. "Urgent news from the border. Blackclaw forces are mobilizing. King Theron himself is leading them." The warmth drained from the afternoon. Kira's stomach dropped as reality crashed back in. "How many?" Calder's voice was instantly commander-sharp. 500 heavy cavalry. Another 1,000 infantry. War banners flying. The scout's eyes found Kira's. "And he's demanding the southern territories surrender the northern princess who dishonored his house." The training ground fell silent. Every warrior looked at Kira with expressions ranging from sympathy to calculation. "So it begins," Kira whispered. "War because I wouldn't kneel." "No," Calder said firmly, moving to stand beside her. "War because Theron can't accept that strength doesn't require submission. This was always coming, Princess. You just gave it a different shape." He turned to address the gathered warriors. "Prepare defensive positions. We don't have the numbers to meet them in open battle, but we can make any attack costly enough that Theron will think twice." "And me?" Kira asked quietly. "I'm what he wants. If I surrender myself, you're not going anywhere." The absolute certainty in Calder's voice sent warmth flooding through her. "You're under Southern Territory protection now. That means something here. Even if it means war with the Blackclaw Empire? Even then." His ocean-dark eyes met hers, serious and unwavering. "Besides, I have a feeling that teaching my cousin the difference between ruling through fear and leading through respect is long overdue." Sarah approached, her expression grim but determined. "The question is whether the Northern Kingdom will support Theron's demands. If your father sends forces to join him." "He won't," Kira said, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "My father understands why I refused." "He would never. But would he?" Would her father choose his daughter's pride over ending the wars? Would the Storm Council decide that one princess was a fair price for peace? As if reading her thoughts, Calder's hand found hers. Just for a moment, just a brief squeeze of reassurance. "We'll face whatever comes," he said quietly. Together. Together. The word that Theron had twisted into submission, Calder offered as partnership. And standing there in a training ground full of warriors who fought as units instead of champions, Kira realized she was finally learning what Real's strength looked like. But first, she had to survive the wrath of a king who'd never learned to see partnership as anything other than weakness. Chapter 4. The Blackclaw army arrived like a thunderstorm. 500 mounted warriors in obsidian armor, their war banners snapping in the wind like hungry beasts. But it was the figure at their head that made Kira's breath catch in her throat. King Theron Blackclaw sat atop a massive black destrier, his armor catching the afternoon sun like captured night. Even from a distance, she could see the fury radiating from him. Impressive force, Calder observed from beside her on the hastily constructed defensive wall. Expensive, too. He's committed serious resources to this. He's committed his pride, Kira said quietly, which for Theron might be more valuable than gold. They watched as a delegation rode forward under a white banner. Theron himself, flanked by his father, the former king, and 3 of his highest-ranking generals. "He's coming to talk first," Sarah noted with surprise. "I expected him to just attack. He wants witnesses," Kira realized with sick certainty. "He wants everyone to see him make his demands, to see what happens when someone refuses a Blackclaw king." Calder's jaw tightened. "Then let's not disappoint him. Sarah, Ben with me. Princess, you should stay." "I'm going." Kira's voice left no room for argument. "This is about me. I won't hide behind walls while others speak for me." Something that might have been approval flickered across Calder's face. "Then stay close. And remember what we practiced. You're not alone anymore." They met in the no man's land between the defensive wall and the Blackclaw lines. Neutral ground, supposedly safe under the banner of parley. But Kira kept her hand near her sword anyway. Theron dismounted with fluid grace, his gold eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Up close, she could see the rage barely contained beneath his regal bearing. "Kira." Her name came out somewhere between a command and a plea. "I've come to bring you home." "Home?" She kept her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered. "You mean back to the throne room where you demanded I grovel? Back to a marriage built on my humiliation?" I made a mistake. The admission seemed to cost him something. The kneeling tradition. It was too much to ask. "We can negotiate different terms." Kira stared at him, trying to find the man she'd once thought she might learn to respect. "You think the problem was just the kneeling? Not the principle behind it? Not the fact that you saw partnership as hierarchy?" "What I see," Theron said, his voice hardening, "is a princess who threw away peace because of pride, whose refusal has already cost lives in the border skirmishes that restarted the day you fled." The words hit like arrows, finding every guilt she'd been nursing. Lives that wouldn't have been lost if you'd accepted that queens kneel to kings. Or, Calder interjected quietly, lives that wouldn't have been lost if kings learned that demanding submission isn't the same as earning respect. Theron's attention snapped to his cousin, and suddenly the air was thick with competing alpha energies. "Stay out of this, Calder. This is between me and my intended bride." "Former intended," Kira corrected sharply. "I'm not your bride, Theron. I'm not your subject. I'm not your anything. You're a princess of the Northern Kingdom," Theron countered, "and your father has already sent word accepting my proposal for reconsideration. The Storm Council wants this alliance. Your people want peace. You're the only one standing in the way." The ground seemed to drop out from under her. Her father had accepted? The council wanted her to return? "You're lying," she said, but her voice wavered. "Am I?" Theron produced a sealed letter, bearing her father's mark. "Read it yourself." With shaking hands, Kira broke the seal. Her father's handwriting blurred as she read words that felt like betrayal. "My daughter, I understand your reasons for refusing the initial ceremony. King Theron has agreed to modified terms. You will kneel only in private, as a gesture of respect rather than public submission. This is more than fair. The council has voted. Peace must come. Return home. We'll discuss this as a family, but the Storm Kingdoms need this alliance. Your father. He sold you out," Sarah breathed, reading over her shoulder. "He's trying to save thousands of lives," Kira said numbly. "And I'm the only thing standing in the way of that." No, Calder said firmly. You're the only thing standing against the principle that women must diminish themselves for men's egos. There's a difference. A difference that costs lives, Theron pointed out. Come home, Kira. Marry me under the modified terms. We can still build something together. Something built on the foundation of me kneeling in private instead of public. Kira's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. You think changing the location makes it better? You think hiding my humiliation makes it acceptable? I think, Theron said, his patience clearly fraying, that you're being selfish, prideful, putting your own ego above the welfare of thousands. The words struck deep because part of her had been thinking the same thing. How many would die because she refused to bend? But then she remembered the training grounds. The warriors fighting as equals. Sarah's words about respect versus fear. Calder's demonstration that strength came from partnership, not hierarchy. You're right, she said quietly. I am being prideful. I'm proud of being a warrior. Proud of my heritage. Proud of refusing to accept that my gender requires me to submit as proof of my worthiness. She stepped closer to Theron, close enough to see her own reflection in his gold eyes. But you're being prideful too, Theron. You're so proud of your Blackclaw traditions that you can't see they're built on breaking the spirits of the women who join your family. You're so proud of your authority that you can't imagine partnership that doesn't include dominance. So what are you proposing? Theron's voice was dangerous now. That I throw away 5 centuries of tradition? That I dismantle everything my ancestors built? I'm proposing, Kira said, her voice gaining strength, that you evolve. That you build something better than what your ancestors knew. That you prove strength doesn't require subjugation. And if I refuse? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Then you go home, Kira said simply, and you find yourself a queen who will kneel. Someone ordinary enough to accept that her worth is measured by her willingness to submit. There's nothing ordinary about you, Princess Kira, Theron said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. That's what makes this such a waste. He turned to mount his horse, then paused. You have until sunset tomorrow to reconsider. After that, I'll take you by force. Your father's letter authorizes me to retrieve you, by negotiation or compulsion. Try it, Calder said, his voice carrying a warning that made several Blackclaw warriors shift nervously. And you'll learn exactly how the southern territories respond to threats against those under our protection. This isn't your fight, cousin. It became my fight when a warrior princess fled to my territory seeking partnership instead of subjugation. When she showed me that there's another way to build alliances besides demanding submission. Theron looked between them, and something calculating entered his expression. I see. This isn't about principle at all, is it? This is about you wanting what I had. Wanting to steal my intended bride. Your former intended, Calder corrected. And I don't want to steal anyone. I want to offer her what you never could, genuine partnership. We'll see about that. Theron mounted his destrier, his generals following suit. Sunset tomorrow, princess. Make your choice. Kneel in private and preserve peace, or refuse again and watch your pride destroy kingdoms. As the Blackclaw delegation rode back to their lines, Kira felt the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. He's right, she whispered. How can I let people die because I won't compromise? Because some compromises destroy more than they save, Calder said quietly. If you kneel to Theron, even in private, you set a precedent. You tell every woman in both kingdoms that their worth is measured by their willingness to submit. You validate the principle that leadership requires diminishment. But if I don't, people die. People die either way. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. The question is whether they die for a principle worth dying for. Kira looked at the Southern Territory warriors gathering on the defensive walls. Looked at the Blackclaw army preparing for battle. Thought about her father's letter, about the Storm Council's vote, about the weight of responsibility crushing her chest. What would you do? She asked Calder. If you were me? He was quiet for a long moment, his ocean-dark eyes searching hers. I'd ask myself whether the peace Theron offers is worth the price he's demanding. Whether a treaty built on your humiliation will last, or whether it will just delay conflict until the next woman refuses to kneel. And then I'd remember that real strength isn't about fighting alone. It's about finding warriors who will stand with you, not because they have to, but because they believe in what you're fighting for. His hand found hers again, warm and calloused and steady. Whatever you decide, Kira, you won't face it alone. That's a promise. Standing there in the shadow of approaching war, With an enemy army demanding her submission and her own father urging compromise, Kira Stormborne realized she'd found something she never expected. Not just allies, not just warriors who would fight beside her, but a partner who saw her strength as something to celebrate rather than control. The only question was, could she be strong enough to choose partnership over peace? To risk lives for principle? To stand firm even when everything demanded she kneel? Sunset tomorrow felt both too far away and far too close. Chapter 5. Kira spent the night walking the defensive walls, watching Blackclaw campfires flicker in the distance like angry stars. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw faces. Her father's disappointment, dying warriors, kingdoms burning because one princess refused to bend. Can't sleep either? Calder appeared beside her with that unnerving silent grace. He carried 2 steaming mugs that smelled of spiced wine and offered her one. How can I? Kira accepted the mug, letting its warmth seep into her cold hands. Sunset is hours away, and I still don't know what I'm going to do. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the enemy camp. Tell me about your mother, Calder said quietly. The one who wore that armor you arrived in. The question surprised her. Why? Because I want to know who shaped the woman stubborn enough to refuse a king. Who taught you that some things are worth fighting for. Kira smiled despite everything. She was fierce. Not in the loud, aggressive way everyone expected from a warrior queen, but in this quiet, unshakable way. She once told me that strength wasn't about never bending. It was about choosing very carefully what you'd bend for. Wise woman. She also told me, Kira continued softly, that the hardest battles aren't the ones you fight with swords. They're the ones you fight with yourself, trying to figure out what you're really fighting for. And what are you fighting for, Kira? The question wasn't rhetorical. He genuinely wanted to know. I thought I was fighting for my pride, she admitted. For my right not to be humiliated. But after training with your warriors, after seeing how you lead. She trailed off, struggling to find words for something she'd only just begun to understand. I think I'm fighting for the principle that partnership shouldn't require diminishment. That strength can exist without dominance. That maybe, just maybe, there's a better way to build kingdoms than on the broken spirits of half their leaders. Calder was quiet for a long moment, his profile sharp against the starlight. My mother, the Blackclaw side of my family, she knelt at her wedding, he said finally. I was 7, old enough to remember the look in her eyes as she did it. Pride and shame and resignation all mixed together. He took a drink of his wine, and Kira saw old pain flicker across his features. She was brilliant, a strategist like none I've seen since. But she spent her whole marriage deferring to my father in public, saving her genius for private councils where she could suggest ideas he'd take credit for. I'm sorry. Don't be. She taught me something invaluable. That the traditions we inherit aren't always the ones we should keep. That just because something has been done for centuries doesn't make it right. He turned to face her fully, his ocean-dark eyes intense in the firelight. When my mother died, one of the last things she told me was to find a woman who would never kneel. She said that's how she'd know I'd learned from her mistakes instead of repeating them. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Calder, I'm not asking you to stay because of me, he interrupted gently. I'm not offering you a different political marriage to replace the one you fled. I'm just telling you that what you're fighting for, this principle that partnership means equality, there are more people who believe in it than you think. He gestured toward the defensive walls where Southern Territory warriors stood watch. Every person here has chosen this way of living, chosen cooperation over domination, chosen to build something based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. But choosing that might cost thousands of lives, Kira whispered. How can I ask others to die for my principles? You're not asking them to die for your principles, a new voice said. Sarah climbed up to join them on the wall, followed by Ben and several other warriors. You're giving them something to die for that's actually worth it. We've been fighting border skirmishes for decades, Ben added. Dying for territory lines that shift back and forth. Dying because kings want glory or resources or revenge. But this, Sarah's eyes were bright with conviction. This is different. This is about whether we're going to keep building kingdoms on the idea that strength requires submission. Whether we're going to perpetuate the cycle of dominance that's poisoned leadership for centuries. If you kneel to Theron, another warrior said, even in private, you tell our daughters that their worth is measured by their willingness to diminish themselves. You tell our sons that real men require submission from their partners. But if you stand firm, Sarah continued, you show them something different. Something better. Kira looked around at the warriors gathering on the walls. Not just Southern Territory fighters, but northern refugees who'd fled here over the years. Women who'd escaped arranged marriages. Men who'd refused to participate in systems of domination. I'm one person, she said. How can one person's choice matter that much? Because, Calder said quietly, revolutions start with one person willing to say no. One person brave enough to stand firm even when everything says to bend. One person who believes that there's a better way even when no one else can see it yet. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You asked me what I'd do in your position. Here's the truth. I'd be terrified, paralyzed by the weight of the choice, convinced that whatever I decided would be the wrong answer. That's exactly how I feel, Kira admitted. But I'd also remember something my mother told me. The hardest choices aren't between good and evil. They're between two goods or two evils, or between a certain small compromise and an uncertain larger principle. So how do you choose? You ask yourself which choice you can live with. Which decision lets you look at yourself in the mirror 10 years from now without flinching? Which path leads to the person you want to become? Kira closed her eyes, thinking about the woman she'd been in that throne room. Thinking about the woman she'd started becoming in these training grounds. Thinking about her mother's quiet strength and her grandmother's warrior spirit. Thinking about what kind of world she wanted to help build. When she opened her eyes, the decision was made. Sarah, she said, her voice steady for the first time in days. Send a message to King Theron. Tell him Princess Kira Stormborne has considered his generous offer. The warriors tensed, waiting. Tell him I refuse. Again, with absolute certainty this time. A cheer rose from the assembled fighters, quickly hushed as Kira continued. And send word to my father. Tell him I love him. Tell him I understand the council's choice. But tell him I'm choosing to stand for something more important than political convenience. They'll attack at sunset, Ben observed, but there was pride in his voice rather than fear. Then we have all day to prepare, Calder said, and the smile he turned on Kira was blazing with admiration. Warriors, to your positions. Today we show the Blackclaw Empire what happens when they underestimate the power of people fighting for principle instead of conquest. As the warriors dispersed to prepare defenses, Calder caught Kira's hand. That took courage, he said quietly. Or stupidity. I guess we'll find out which. Either way, he said, squeezing her hand. You won't face it alone. Remember, we fight as units here. Your battle is our battle. Why? Kira asked, needing to understand. Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know? Because, Calder said simply, you're not just someone I barely know. You're the woman who rode into enemy territory bleeding and broken, and still had the strength to refuse an empire. You're the warrior who learned coordinated fighting in days when it takes most people months. You're the princess who chose principle over peace. He paused, his ocean-dark eyes searching hers. And because somewhere in the past few days, while teaching you to trust others to watch your back, I started hoping you might trust me with more than just combat support. The words sent warmth flooding through her that had nothing to do with spiced wine and everything to do with being seen. Truly seen, for exactly who she was. Calder, a horn blast cut through the dawn. Not from the Blackclaw camp, but from the north. What is that? Kira breathed. Sarah came running, her face bright with shocked joy. It's the Storm Kingdom, she gasped. Your father's forces. They're not coming to support Theron. They're coming to support you. Kira's knees went weak. But the letter, the council vote, was apparently overruled by a king who decided his daughter's principles were worth more than political convenience, Calder said, reading the banner signals. He's bringing 500 warriors under your family's colors. And there's more, Sarah added. 3 other kingdoms have sent delegations. Minor houses, but their message is clear. They're standing with the princess who refused to kneel. The sun was rising over the defensive walls, painting everything in shades of gold and hope. What had seemed like an impossible stand against overwhelming odds was becoming something else entirely. A statement, a movement, a revolution built on the radical idea that partnership didn't require submission. Well, Kira said, her voice shaking with emotion and determination. I guess we'd better make sure we win. Otherwise, this is going to be a really short revolution. Calder's laugh was warm and genuine. Then let's show my cousin what he could have had if he'd been smart enough to see strength in partnership instead of submission. As warriors scrambled to adjust defensive positions for the new allies, as kingdoms that had never cooperated before began coordinating strategies, as the impossible became possible through shared conviction, Kira realized something fundamental. She'd thought refusing to kneel would cost her everything. Instead, it had given her something she'd never known she needed: a family of warriors who fought not because they had to, but because they chose to believe in something better. But first, they had to survive the wrath of a king who'd never learned that real power came from inspiration, not intimidation. Sunset was coming, and with it, the battle that would determine whether kingdoms continued to be built on submission or whether a new way of leading was possible. Standing on those defensive walls, surrounded by warriors who'd chosen principle over peace, Kira Stormborne was finally ready to fight for something worth the cost. Chapter 6. The arrival of the Storm Kingdom forces changed everything. What had been a desperate defensive stand became something else entirely: a coalition of kingdoms standing together against the principle of subjugation. Kira's father, King Aldrich Stormborne, rode through the defensive lines like vengeance personified. His armor bore the marks of hasty travel, suggesting he'd ridden hard the moment he heard his daughter's final refusal. "Father," Kira breathed as he dismounted. For a moment, they just stared at each other. A king who'd told his daughter to compromise, and a daughter who'd chosen principle over his advice. Then Aldrich pulled her into a crushing embrace. "Forgive me," he whispered. "The council pushed for compromise. They showed me numbers, projections, all the logical reasons why your pride wasn't worth the cost. And for a moment, may the gods forgive me, I believed them." "What changed your mind?" Kira asked, her voice muffled against his armor. "Your mother." Aldrich pulled back, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was preparing to ride with Theron's forces, to help him retrieve you. And I swear I heard her voice as clearly as I hear yours now. She asked me whether I wanted to be the king who taught his granddaughters to kneel, or the king who showed them how to stand." He cupped Kira's face with hands still calloused from weapons training despite his years. "I chose wrong initially, but I'm choosing right now. My daughter will kneel to no man. Not in public, not in private, not ever, unless she chooses to." "Your Majesty." Calder approached with military formality, but there was warmth in his voice. "The southern territories are honored to stand with the Storm Kingdom." Aldrich studied the younger man with a father's assessing gaze, taking in the way Calder stood close to Kira, the way his daughter's posture had relaxed the moment this prince appeared. "Prince Calder, I've heard interesting reports about your training methods, about coordinated units and partnership-based leadership. All true, Your Majesty. And I've heard even more interesting reports," Aldrich continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "about my daughter training with your warriors, about her learning to trust others to guard her back." The implication was clear. What else was she learning to trust this prince with? "Father," Kira interrupted, heat flooding her cheeks. "We have a battle to prepare for. Personal discussions can wait." "Can they?" Aldrich's smile was knowing. "Very well. But after we survive this, you and I are having a conversation about exactly what kind of alliance you're building with the Southern Territories." As her father moved off to coordinate with his commanders, Sarah appeared at Kira's elbow with barely suppressed glee. "Your father just threatened Calder with the 'what are your intentions' talk. That's adorable." "That's mortifying," Kira corrected. "We're about to face an army, and he's worried about his daughter's heart." Calder finished quietly. He'd moved closer again, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "That's what good fathers do. They protect the things that matter most." Before Kira could respond, horns blared from the Blackclaw lines. Theron's army was mobilizing, but not for attack. A single rider approached under a white banner, carrying a message scroll. Ben intercepted the messenger and brought the scroll to where the allied commanders had gathered. Kira broke the seal and read aloud. "Princess Kira Stormborne, your refusal has been noted. Your father's betrayal of our agreement is an act of war against the Blackclaw Empire. I offer one final chance for resolution, single combat. You versus me. The winner determines the terms. If I win, you accept the marriage with modified terms and your father's forces stand down. If you win," she paused, her breath catching. "If you win, I acknowledge your right to refuse, withdraw all claims, and accept that our alliance is ended. No further bloodshed. No war between our kingdoms. Just you and me, settling this as warriors. Silence fell over the assembled commanders. "It's a trap," Sarah said immediately. "Theron is one of the most skilled fighters in the known kingdoms. He's trained since childhood." "So have I," Kira interrupted. "Against other nobles," her father said gently. "Practice bouts with rules and supervision. Theron has killed in actual combat. This isn't training, daughter. This is exactly what needs to happen." Kira looked around at the gathered warriors, Southern Territory fighters, Storm Kingdom soldiers, delegations from smaller houses. "If I refuse, we fight a battle that will cost hundreds of lives. If I accept and lose, I'm the only one who pays the price. And if you die..." Calder's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the emotion beneath it. "Then I die standing for something that matters," Kira said simply. "But I don't intend to lose." She turned to face him fully, reading the fear and pride and something deeper in his ocean-dark eyes. "You taught me that strength comes from fighting together, from trusting others to watch my back. But sometimes, a warrior has to stand alone. Sometimes the only way to prove a principle is to put everything on the line for it." "Spoken like your mother," Aldrich said quietly. "Brave and stubborn and absolutely terrifying in your certainty." He gripped her shoulder. "If you're going to do this, do it the Stormborne way. Fast, strategic, and with every trick your mother ever taught you." "I accept King Theron's challenge," Kira called to the waiting messenger. "Single combat at sunset. No interference from either side. Winner determines all terms." As the messenger rode back to the Blackclaw lines, the reality of what she'd agreed to settled over the assembled warriors like a shroud. "Well," Sarah said, breaking the tension, "we have 4 hours to prepare you for the fight of your life. Let's not waste them." The afternoon became a blur of preparation. Her father reviewed every technique he'd ever taught her. Sarah and Ben drilled her on fighting larger opponents. The Storm Kingdom's master-at-arms offered advice on reading Theron's style from his previous documented combats. But it was Calder who pulled her aside an hour before sunset, away from the others, to a quiet space behind the supply tents. "I need you to listen carefully," he said, his voice intense. "Theron fights like he leads, overwhelming force, direct dominance, expecting opponents to break under pressure. I know. Everyone's been telling me. But that's not what I'm worried about." He gripped her shoulders gently. "I'm worried about you fighting his way, trying to match his strength, his aggression, his style. Then how do I fight him? The same way you've been learning here. Not as a solitary champion, but as a warrior who understands that sometimes strength means redirecting force instead of meeting it head-on." He released her shoulders and stepped back. "Show him everything he could have had if he'd been smart enough to value partnership. Show him that refusing to kneel doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong enough to choose your own path. And if I lose, then we go to war and spend the rest of our lives trying to build the world you believed in." His smile was soft and sad. "But I don't think you're going to lose." "Why not?" "Because," Calder said, stepping close enough that she could feel his breath, "you're not fighting alone anymore. Even when you're standing in that circle by yourself, you'll have every warrior here standing with you in spirit. You'll have your mother's legacy and your father's pride in." He hesitated, then continued quietly. "And you'll have me, hoping with everything I am that you survive this, so I can tell you properly what these past few days have meant." "Tell me now," Kira whispered. "Just in case." "No." He shook his head. "I'll tell you after you win. It'll give you something to fight for beyond principle." He kissed her forehead, just a brief, gentle touch, then stepped away before she could respond. "Win, Kira Stormborne. Then we'll talk about what comes next." As sunset approached and Kira walked toward the combat circle that had been marked in the neutral ground between armies, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. A rejected marriage proposal, a flight into enemy territory, warriors who'd taught her that strength came in many forms, a prince who'd shown her what partnership could really mean. And now, single combat against a king who'd never learned that forcing submission wasn't the same as earning respect. Theron was already waiting in the circle, his armor gleaming like captured night, his gold eyes tracking her approach with predatory focus. "Last chance," he called as she entered the circle. "Kneel now. End this peacefully." Kira drew her sword, her mother's sword, passed down through generations of Stormborne women who'd never broken. "I've got a better idea," she said, falling into the fighting stance Calder had perfected with her. "How about you learn what it means to face a woman who refuses to be diminished?" Theron's smile was sharp as his blade. "So be it." The combat began. Chapter 7. Theron attacked like a storm. Fast, powerful, overwhelming. His first strike would have taken her head off if she'd been standing where he expected. But Kira had learned to fight differently now. She wasn't where he expected. She flowed aside like water, redirecting his momentum, using his own force against him just as Calder had taught her. Theron's blade bit into earth instead of flesh, and she was already moving, striking at his exposed side. Her blade rang against his armor. Not enough to penetrate, but enough to sting. Enough to surprise him. "You've improved," Theron acknowledged, circling her like a predator. "Someone's been training you." "Lots of someones," Kira corrected. "That's the difference between us, Theron. You trained to be a singular champion. I learned to be part of something larger. How does that help you now?" He lunged again, a combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed most opponents. "You're alone in this circle, Princess. All your partners are watching from the sidelines." But she wasn't alone. Even as she defended against his assault, she could feel the presence of every warrior who'd trained with her. Sarah's voice in her head, reminding her to use speed against strength. Ben's advice about creating angles. Her father's lessons about reading an opponent's weight distribution. And Calder's final words. "You're not fighting alone." Kira stopped retreating. Started using the techniques she'd learned in the Southern Territory training grounds. Not meeting force with force, but creating openings, forcing Theron to defend positions he'd thought were secure. She fought like water finding cracks in stone, like wind eroding mountains, like everything she'd been taught about partnership and coordination, channeled into solo combat. And slowly, impossibly, Theron began to realize he was in a real fight. "Who taught you this?" he demanded, breathing harder now. His armor, meant to intimidate and protect, was becoming a liability in extended combat. "This isn't Northern style. This isn't anything I've seen before." "This is what happens," Kira said, her own breathing controlled despite her exertion. "When you learn from warriors who fight together instead of alone. When you stop trying to prove you're stronger than everyone else and start learning how to be stronger because of everyone else." She pressed her advantage, remembering every lesson, every correction, every moment of trust she'd built with the Southern Territory fighters. Theron was stronger, larger, more experienced in lethal combat. But Kira was fighting for something he'd never understood. The principle that partnership didn't require dominance, that leadership could be based on inspiration instead of intimidation. Their blades met again and again, the sound ringing across the battlefield like bells marking the moments until one of them fell. "You can't win," Theron growled, his frustration showing. "Even if you defeat me, my army won't accept this. They'll tear your alliance apart. Then they'll learn the same lesson you're learning," Kira countered, using his own momentum to send him stumbling. That underestimating women who refuse to kneel is a fatal mistake. She saw her opening. Theron's left side, overextended from his stumble, armor joints exposed. One precise strike, and she could end this. But instead of going for the kill, Kira did something that made every warrior watching catch their breath. She stopped, stepped back, lowered her sword. "What are you doing?" Theron demanded, confusion and suspicion warring in his expression. "I'm giving you a choice," Kira said clearly, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "The same choice you never gave me. The same choice you've never given any woman in your family." She gestured to the assembled armies, Blackclaw, Storm Kingdom, Southern Territory, and smaller houses all watching in stunned silence. "You can yield. Acknowledge that I've proven my point, that refusing to kneel doesn't make me weak. We can end this without death, without war, without more bloodshed. You want me to surrender?" Theron's voice was incredulous. "To kneel?" "No." Kira's response was firm. "I want you to make a choice. The same choice you demanded from me. But I'm offering it, not demanding it. I'm giving you the option to preserve your life and your honor by acknowledging a simple truth." "What truth?" "That strength doesn't require submission. That leadership can exist without domination. That partnership, real partnership, makes kingdoms stronger, not weaker." She lowered her sword completely, standing defenseless before him. "I won't kill you to prove that point, Theron. I won't become the thing I'm fighting against, someone who uses force to demand submission." The silence was absolute. Every eye on the battlefield fixed on the Blackclaw King, waiting to see what he would do. For a long moment, Theron stood frozen, his sword still raised, face cycling through a dozen emotions: rage, humiliation, confusion, and finally, slowly, something that might have been understanding. "You're serious," he said. "You'd give up your advantage. Risk everything you fought for. Just to offer me a choice." "That's what partnership means," Kira said simply. "It's what you should have offered me in that throne room. It's what every king should offer every queen." Theron looked at his sword, at Kira standing defenseless, at the armies watching, at his own warriors, seeing their undefeatable king being offered mercy by the woman he'd tried to force into submission. "My father will call this weakness," he said quietly. "Your father is wrong." Kira's voice was gentle now. "This isn't weakness, Theron. This is the hardest kind of strength. Choosing to offer grace when you have the power to take vengeance." For another eternal moment, nothing moved. Then slowly, deliberately, King Theron Blackclaw lowered his sword. "I yield," he said, and the words seemed to cost him everything. "Princess Kira Stormborne has won this combat. Her refusal stands. The marriage alliance is ended by her right of victory." A roar erupted from the allied forces. Storm Kingdom soldiers, Southern Territory warriors, delegations from smaller houses, all celebrating not just a victory, but a principle proven. But Kira's attention was on Theron, seeing the man beneath the crown for the first time. "Thank you," she said quietly, meant only for him, "for being strong enough to choose differently than your training demanded." "Don't thank me yet," Theron replied, his voice rough. "My empire won't accept this easily. There will be factions that call for continued conflict. Then we'll face them," Kira said. "But this time, we'll face them as kingdoms who've chosen partnership over domination, as allies instead of enemies." She extended her hand, not in submission but in respect, warrior to warrior, leader to leader. After a heartbeat's hesitation, Theron took it. The gesture sent shockwaves through both armies. A Blackclaw king acknowledging a woman as an equal. A warrior princess offering partnership instead of triumph. "I was wrong," Theron said, loud enough for nearby commanders to hear. "About many things, but mostly about measuring worth by willingness to submit." He released her hand and turned to face his army. "The Blackclaw Empire is withdrawing. Any warrior who wishes to stay and learn this new way of fighting, this partnership style the Southern Territories practice, has my permission. We have much to learn about leading without dominating." As Theron walked back toward his lines, Kira finally allowed herself to breathe, to feel the weight of what had just happened. She'd won. Not just the combat, but the principle. Not by killing her opponent, but by offering him the choice he'd never offered her. Then Calder was there, sweeping her into his arms with a joy that made her laugh despite her exhaustion. "You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman," he said, spinning her around. "You didn't just win. You changed the entire conversation about leadership and partnership." "We changed it," Kira corrected, finding her father in the crowd and seeing tears of pride streaming down his face. "All of us together." Sarah approached with a grin. "So, Ice Queen, what now? You've defeated a king, proven your principle, and started what's probably going to be called the partnership revolution in history books." Kira looked around at the assembled warriors, Southern Territory fighters who'd taught her to trust, Storm Kingdom soldiers who'd stood with her, even a few Blackclaw warriors who'd stayed to witness this new way of thinking. "Now," she said, "we build something better. We create a model of leadership that doesn't require anyone to kneel. We show every kingdom that strength comes from mutual respect, not forced submission." "And," Calder added quietly, meant only for her, "now I get to tell you what I've been wanting to say since you walked into my territory looking lost and fierce and absolutely extraordinary." Kira's heart skipped. "Tell me." "Later," he promised. "When we're not surrounded by armies and your father isn't glaring at me like he's planning my murder. For now." He kissed her, right there in front of both kingdoms, in front of her father and his warriors and anyone who cared to watch. Kissed her like she was precious and powerful and everything he'd been waiting for. When they finally broke apart, breathless and grinning, Kira realized something fundamental. She'd thought refusing to kneel would cost her everything. Instead, it had given her everything she'd never known she needed. A family of warriors who chose partnership. A father who'd chosen pride over politics. A prince who saw her strength as something to celebrate. And most importantly, the absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for. Some principles were worth risking everything to protect. And sometimes the strongest thing a warrior could do was offer grace instead of vengeance. Chapter 8. 3 days after the duel, Kira stood in what had been a war camp and was rapidly transforming into something else entirely. A council ground where multiple kingdoms were gathered to draft new treaties. "This is unprecedented," her father said, studying the maps spread across the planning table. 5 kingdoms in active negotiation without a single marriage alliance or territorial concession as leverage. 6 kingdoms, Calder corrected, pointing to a newly arrived banner. The Eastern Territories just sent delegates. They heard about what happened and want to explore partnership-based alliances. Kira smiled, watching warriors from different kingdoms training together in the grounds below. Blackclaw fighters learning Southern Territory coordination techniques. Storm Kingdom soldiers teaching defensive formations. Women warriors who'd been relegated to support roles finally being allowed into combat training. "It's spreading faster than I thought possible," she admitted. "That's what happens when you give people an alternative to systems that never serve them well," Sarah observed, joining them at the table. "Half the warriors in my family spent years following orders they knew were stupid because hierarchy demanded obedience. Now they're being asked for input, for innovation, for partnership. Not everyone is happy about it," Calder noted. "We're getting reports of resistance from traditional factions. Lords who see partnership as threatening their authority." "They're not wrong," Kira said thoughtfully. "This does threaten their authority, the kind of authority that's based on forced submission rather than earned respect." A messenger arrived, bowing quickly before delivering his report. "Your Highnesses, King Theron requests an audience. He says it's urgent." Kira and Calder exchanged glances. Since the duel, Theron had been conspicuously absent from the negotiations, retreating to his camp to deal with internal Blackclaw politics. "Send him in," Kira said. Theron entered looking unlike she'd ever seen him. Tired, uncertain, stripped of the overwhelming confidence that had defined him. He nodded respectfully to both Calder and Kira before speaking. "I've spent the past 3 days watching my empire fracture," he said without preamble. "Half my commanders want to continue the old ways. The other half are demanding the changes you've started here. My father is furious. My generals are divided. And I." He paused, something like vulnerability crossing his face. "I don't know how to lead without demanding submission. It's all I was ever taught. All I've ever known." The admission hung in the air, honest and raw. "So teach me," Theron continued, meeting Kira's eyes. "You were willing to offer me grace in combat. I'm asking if you're willing to offer guidance now. Show me how to lead the way you're building here." Kira looked at this king who'd tried to force her to kneel, who'd threatened war, who'd represented everything she'd fought against, and saw not an enemy, but someone caught in systems they'd both inherited, systems that served no one well. "It won't be easy," she said finally. "Changing how you lead means changing how you think about power itself. It means accepting that people following you by choice are more valuable than people obeying you from fear." "I'm beginning to understand that," Theron admitted. "Watching my best warriors request transfers to Southern Territory, seeing them light up when they talk about fighting as units instead of competing for individual glory." He shook his head. "I built an empire on warriors, trying to prove they were the strongest. You're building something on warriors, making each other stronger. And I'm starting to see which one survives in the long term." Calder stepped forward, offering his hand to his cousin. "Then stay. Train with us. Learn the coordination techniques. See how leadership works when it's based on mutual respect instead of forced hierarchy." "Your warriors won't accept me," Theron said. "I'm the enemy. The king who tried to force submission." "You're the king who chose to yield rather than kill when you had the chance," Kira corrected. "That took courage. That took the exact kind of strength we're trying to build here." She moved to stand beside Calder. The two of them united in purpose, if not yet formally bound in anything else. "This isn't about punishing people for past mistakes, Theron. It's about building something better than what we inherited. If you're genuinely willing to learn, to change, to help create a different model of leadership, then we're stronger with you than without you," Calder finished. Theron looked between them, something like hope flickering in his gold eyes. "I'll try. I can't promise I'll transform overnight. Centuries of tradition don't disappear because of one duel. But I'll try to learn. That's all any of us can do," Kira said. Over the following weeks, the war camp transformed into a center of revolutionary thinking. Warriors trained together across kingdom lines. Leaders gathered to draft treaties based on partnership rather than dominance. Women who'd never been allowed in combat roles proved themselves as valuable as any male warrior. And through it all, Kira found herself working alongside Calder with an ease that felt both natural and thrilling. They complemented each other. Her strategic brilliance balanced his tactical genius. His calm steadiness grounded her passionate intensity. Together, they were becoming something neither could have been alone. "Walk with me?" Calder asked one evening as the sun set over the transformed camp. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a quiet overlook, away from the bustle of the camp below. "Do you remember," Calder said, "when I told you I'd explain what these past weeks have meant? After you won." Kira's heart picked up pace. "I remember. I've been trying to find the right words. The speech that would capture everything I feel." He turned to face her fully. "But I keep coming back to something simpler." He took her hands, his calluses matching hers. "Warrior to warrior, leader to leader, partner to partner. I love you, Kira Stormborne. Not because you're a princess or a skilled fighter or the catalyst for a revolution. I love you because you're brave enough to stand for principles when everyone says to compromise. Because you're strong enough to offer grace when you have power to take vengeance. Because you looked at systems that have existed for centuries and said, we can do better." Tears pricked Kira's eyes. Joy, relief, recognition of something she'd felt growing, but hadn't dared name. "I love you because," Calder continued, his voice rough with emotion, "you're teaching me that being a strong leader doesn't mean standing above others. It means standing with them, beside them, lifting them up. Calder, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet." His smile was soft. "When I ask, if I ask, it won't be a political arrangement or a strategic alliance. It'll be because I can't imagine building this new world with anyone else." "Then I should tell you," Kira said, her voice shaking, "that I love you too. That you showed me what partnership really means when everyone else had taught me it meant submission. That you gave me space to be strong instead of asking me to be diminished." She stepped closer, close enough to feel his heartbeat against her chest. "And when you do ask, not if, when my answer will be yes. Because I can't imagine building this new world without you either." They kissed as the sun set over a camp full of warriors learning to fight together, leaders learning to lead through inspiration, and kingdoms learning that strength came from partnership, not dominance. Below them, Sarah caught sight of them and elbowed Ben with a grin. "About time," she said. "I was starting to think they'd need another war to realize they were in love." "Give them a month," Ben replied with a laugh. "We'll need to plan a wedding that doesn't involve anyone kneeling." In the shadows, even Theron watched with something like wistful understanding. He'd lost Kira, yes, but watching her with Calder, seeing the easy partnership between them, he was beginning to understand what he'd really lost. Not a warrior princess who would have made him look powerful, but the chance to learn what partnership actually meant, to grow beyond the limitations of his upbringing, to be more than what his ancestors had been. But it wasn't too late. Not entirely. He could still learn, still change, still become the kind of leader who inspired rather than intimidated. It would take time, humility, the courage to admit that centuries of tradition might have been wrong. But standing here, watching kingdoms cooperate who'd been enemies for generations, Theron thought maybe, just maybe, change was possible after all. Chapter 9. The attack came in the depths of night, 3 weeks after the duel that changed everything. Kira woke to the sound of steel on steel and Sarah's urgent voice. "Princess, we're under attack. Blackclaw traditionalists. They're targeting the Partnership Council." Kira was moving before fully awake, grabbing weapons, pulling on armor. Beside her, Calder was doing the same, his face grim in the darkness. "How many?" he demanded. "At least 50. Maybe more. They're using the chaos to target leaders who support the new treaties." Sarah's expression was murderous. "Theron's father is leading them. They're calling this a cleansing of weakness. The former Blackclaw king. Of course. He'd been conspicuously silent since his son's yield, retreating to the edges of the camp. But silence didn't mean acceptance. "They're targeting the council tent," Calder said, understanding flooding through him. "They're going after everyone who's been drafting the new treaties, including Kira's father, including the delegates from 6 kingdoms, including everyone who dared to imagine leadership without domination." They burst from their quarters into chaos. The camp was erupting in combat, traditionalist Blackclaw warriors attacking anyone who'd supported the Partnership Revolution. But they'd underestimated one crucial thing. These warriors had been training together for weeks, learning to fight as coordinated units, building trust across kingdom lines. "Sarah," Kira shouted. Take your unit and secure the council tent. Ben, coordinate with Storm Kingdom forces. Establish a defensive perimeter. What about you? Calder demanded. I'm going after Theron's father. Kira's voice was cold as winter. This ends now. Then I'm coming with you. No. She grabbed his arm. You're needed here, coordinating the defense. This is exactly what we've been training for. Fighting as units, trusting each other to handle different objectives. Understanding flickered in his eyes, followed by pride and fear in equal measure. Come back to me, he said simply. Always. They kissed quickly, fiercely, then split apart. Calder racing to coordinate the overall defense. Kira heading toward the source of the attack with a hand-picked team of warriors who'd proven themselves in training. She found the former king near the council tent, rallying his traditionalist forces with rhetoric about strength and purity and the dangers of letting women lead. Former King Blackclaw, Kira called, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your son yielded honorably. The old ways are ending. Don't make this worse. The former king turned, his face twisted with contempt. My son showed weakness, letting a woman best him in combat, then begging her to teach him her soft ways. He spat. The Blackclaw line has ruled through strength for centuries. We will not be diminished by partnership nonsense. Then you'll be destroyed by it, Kira said simply. Because what you call weakness is actually the hardest kind of strength. The strength to grow, to change, to admit that the old ways serve no one well. Enough talk. The former king raised his sword. Let's see if your partnership philosophy protects you in real combat. The battle that followed was vicious. The former king was old, but he'd trained warriors for decades. He knew every technique, every weakness, every trick. But Kira wasn't fighting alone. The warriors she'd brought, Storm Kingdom, Southern Territory, even a few Blackclaw soldiers who'd embraced the new ways, fought as a perfect unit, covering each other, creating openings, demonstrating everything they'd learned about coordination over competition. And slowly, inevitably, the traditionalist attack faltered. Warriors who'd been promised an easy cleansing of weakness found themselves facing coordinated resistance they couldn't break. This is impossible, the former king gasped, parrying strikes from multiple directions. Separate kingdoms don't cooperate like this. Warriors don't fight for anything except their own glory. That's where you're wrong, Kira said, her blade finding an opening. Warriors fight hardest for principles they believe in, for families they choose, for futures they want to build. Her strike disarmed him. The former king fell to his knees, surrounded by warriors from multiple kingdoms, all united in defense of something he'd never understood. You should kill me, he said bitterly. Make an example. Show your strength. No, Kira said. I'm going to do something harder. I'm going to let you live and watch the world change around you. Watch your son become a better king than you ever were. Watch kingdoms thrive on partnership while your empire of dominance crumbles. She gestured to the Storm Kingdom warriors. Take him into custody. He'll stand trial for attacking a peace council. Not summary execution, actual justice with representatives from multiple kingdoms. As the former king was led away, Kira turned to find the battle winding down. The traditionalist attack had failed. The partnership council was secure, and warriors from 6 kingdoms stood together, having defended something worth fighting for. Calder found her in the aftermath, blood-spattered but unharmed. Your father is safe. The council is intact. The attack failed. He pulled her close. And you're brilliant and terrifying, and I love you more every time you refuse to become the thing you're fighting against. I had good teachers, Kira said, leaning into his embrace. Teachers who showed me that strength comes in many forms. What happens now? Sarah asked, approaching with the rest of the defense team. The traditionalists will regroup. They won't accept this easily. Let them try, Kira said, looking around at the warriors who'd stood together. Every time they attack, they prove our point. Every time they try to maintain dominance through force, they demonstrate why partnership is stronger. She raised her voice so the assembled warriors could hear. This is what we're building. Not kingdoms that fear change, but alliances that embrace it. Not leadership that demands submission, but partnerships that inspire loyalty. Every attack against us makes us stronger because we face it together. A cheer rose from the assembled warriors, battered, exhausted, but triumphant. They'd defended more than just a council. They defended an idea, a principle, a future worth fighting for. And standing there surrounded by warriors from kingdoms that had been enemies weeks ago, Kira realized something profound. The revolution wasn't just about her refusing to kneel. It was about creating a world where no one had to. Chapter 10. 2 months after the traditionalist attack, the Partnership Council reconvened. This time in a newly constructed hall that bore symbols from all participating kingdoms equally. No throne dominated the space. Instead, a circular table sat at the center, every seat the same height, every voice given equal weight. The Partnership Accords, King Aldrich announced, laying the finished document on the table, represent the most comprehensive reimagining of inter-kingdom cooperation in recorded history. Kira studied the document she'd spent weeks helping to craft. It was revolutionary in its simplicity. Article 1. No kingdom shall demand submission as proof of alliance. Article 2. Military cooperation shall be based on coordinated units, not hierarchical command. Article 3. Leadership positions shall be earned through demonstrated capability, not assigned by gender or birthright. Article 4. Treaties shall be negotiated between equals, with all parties maintaining sovereignty. Article 5. Disputes shall be resolved through council arbitration, not unilateral force. It's everything we fought for, Sarah said, reading over Kira's shoulder. Put into formal law. It's a start, Calder corrected gently. Laws are only as strong as people's commitment to upholding them. The real work begins now, teaching new generations to lead this way, to think this way, to believe partnership is stronger than dominance. Theron sat across the table, looking like a different man than the king who demanded Kira kneel. The past months had humbled him in ways that combat never could. I've been reviewing the Blackclaw succession laws, he said quietly. They're problematic. They explicitly require queens to kneel, require female heirs to defer to younger male siblings, require wives to seek permission for independent action. He looked up, meeting Kira's eyes. I want to rewrite them, model them on these accords. But I'll face resistance from the traditionalist faction, the ones who didn't join my father's attack but still believe in the old ways. Then you'll need support, Kira said. Not just from outside kingdoms, but from within. Women in your own kingdom who've been waiting for permission to be more than ornamental. I don't even know how to find them. They've been trained to hide their capabilities, to never challenge male authority. Leave that to me, Sarah interjected with a wicked grin. I know exactly where to find Blackclaw women who are tired of kneeling. Give me 2 weeks and access to your kingdom, and I'll have you a coalition that'll make the traditionalists weep. The image of Sarah unleashing repressed Blackclaw women on an unsuspecting patriarchy made several people smile. There's another matter, Aldrich said, his voice taking on a formal tone that made Kira's stomach tighten. The Storm Kingdom needs to address succession. My daughter has proven herself a capable leader, but our laws currently require her to marry and defer rulership to her husband. Every eye in the council turned to Kira and Calder. I'm proposing, Aldrich continued, that we rewrite Storm Kingdom succession laws to allow for co-equal rule. 2 monarchs sharing power, making decisions together. That's never been done, one of the Eastern Territory delegates objected. How would disputes be resolved? Who has final authority? That's the point, Kira said, finding her voice. True partnership doesn't need final authority. It needs communication, compromise, mutual respect. If 2 people can't work together as equals, they shouldn't rule together at all. And if you disagree? Another delegate pressed. If you and your eventual partner reach an impasse? Then we keep talking until we find a solution we both can live with, Calder said quietly. That's what partnership means. Not one person winning and one losing, but both finding a way forward together. The way he said it, the way his eyes met Kira's, made her heart skip. Is this theoretical? Sarah asked innocently. Or are we about to get a royal wedding announcement? Heat flooded Kira's cheeks. We're discussing legal frameworks. We're discussing the future, Aldrich interrupted, his voice warm. And I think my daughter knows exactly what kind of future she wants to build. Kira looked at Calder across the council table. This prince who'd taught her what partnership really meant, who'd stood beside her through revolution and attack, who looked at her like she was both powerful and precious. After the accords are signed, she said carefully, and after we've established the legal frameworks for co-equal rule, and after Calder has a chance to ask me properly without half the known kingdoms watching. Then yes, she finished, her smile breaking free. Then the answer will be yes. The council erupted in cheers and laughter. Even the formal delegates couldn't maintain their diplomatic composure. Calder stood, moving around the table to where Kira sat. "Well," he said, kneeling, but not in submission. "Kneeling to bring them eye to eye, equals choosing each other. Since half the known kingdoms are already watching, and since I can't imagine waiting another moment." He pulled out a ring, simple silver carved with interlocking patterns that represented both their kingdoms. "Kira Stormborne, warrior princess, revolutionary, the woman who taught me that true strength requires the courage to change. Will you build this new world with me? As partners, equals, co-rulers who prove every day that leadership doesn't require dominance." Tears streamed down Kira's face. Joy and love and recognition of something that had been growing since the moment she'd stumbled into his territory, broken and fierce. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to partnership. Yes to building something better. Yes to proving that love doesn't require kneeling, it requires standing together." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the council chambers erupted in celebration. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Kira realized that every delegate was standing, applauding not just an engagement, but what it represented. A new model of leadership, a new way of building kingdoms, a new future where strength came from partnership, not submission. "Well," Theron said, his voice carrying unexpected warmth, "if I had to lose my intended bride, at least she ended up changing the world." He raised his glass in a toast. "To Princess Kira and Prince Calder. May your partnership be the first of many that prove power and respect can coexist." "To the partnership accords," Aldrich added. "May they outlast all of us and inspire generations who never knew the old ways. And to warriors everywhere," Sarah called out, "who are tired of kneeling and ready to stand together." As the celebration continued, as delegates from multiple kingdoms toasted a future built on cooperation, as warriors who'd been enemies months ago drank together as allies, Kira leaned against Calder and let herself feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. She'd thought refusing to kneel would cost her everything. Instead, it had given her everything she'd never known to dream of. A partner who saw her as an equal. Kingdoms learning to cooperate. Warriors fighting together instead of competing alone. And most importantly, the absolute certainty that change was possible when people were brave enough to stand for principles that mattered. "What are you thinking?" Calder asked quietly. "I'm thinking," Kira said, "that my mother would have loved this. That she spent her life trying to be what everyone expected. And now her daughter gets to build something where expectations are rewritten. She'd be proud of you." "She'd be proud of us," Kira corrected. "Of what we're building together." She looked around the chamber. At her father, tears of joy in his eyes. At Sarah and Ben, already planning celebration festivities. At Theron, genuinely smiling for the first time since she'd met him. At delegates from kingdoms that had never cooperated before now drafting treaties as equals. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" she asked. "The beginning of what?" "Of everything. Of kingdoms learning that partnership is stronger than dominance. Of leaders realizing that inspiring people is more powerful than controlling them. Of a world where no one has to kneel unless they choose to." Calder's smile was warm and certain and full of promises. "Then let's build it together. One partnership at a time. One kingdom at a time. One warrior at a time, learning that they're stronger with others than alone. Starting with us." "Starting with us," he agreed. Two warriors who found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of rejection. They kissed again as celebration swirled around them, and Kira thought about the woman she'd been in that throne room. Broken, humiliated, convinced she'd lost everything by refusing to kneel. That woman would have been amazed to see what refusing to kneel had actually created. Not just a personal victory, but a revolution. Not just a love story, but a blueprint for building better kingdoms. Not just one princess standing firm, but a movement of warriors choosing partnership over dominance. Sometimes the hardest choices led to the best outcomes. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted led to finding everything you needed. Sometimes refusing to kneel was the first step toward building a world where no one had to. Chapter 11. The ceremony took place 3 months later in neutral territory, a meadow between kingdoms unmarked by borders, belonging to no one and everyone simultaneously. "Fitting," Aldrich observed as they surveyed the preparations, "that a wedding meant to symbolize partnership should happen in a place that already represents cooperation." Kira barely heard him. She was too busy watching Calder coordinate with warriors from multiple kingdoms, making sure everyone had roles that honored their traditions without requiring anyone to submit to foreign customs. "He's good at this," Sarah said, appearing beside her in formal armor. "The coordinating, compromising, making everyone feel valued. You picked well." "I didn't pick him," Kira corrected with a smile. "We found each other. Even better. The ceremony itself was unlike any royal wedding in recorded history. No throne dominated the space. No one was required to kneel or bow. Instead, Kira and Calder stood at the center of a circle formed by warriors from all the Partnership Accord kingdoms. "We gather," Aldrich announced, "to witness not just a joining of two people, but a demonstration of the principles we've committed to upholding: partnership, equality, mutual respect." The ceremony proceeded with elements from both their traditions, woven together into something new. Kira's Storm Kingdom vows about standing together through all weather. Calder's Southern Territory pledges about fighting as one unit. New words they'd written together about building a future where leadership meant service, not dominance. "I promise," Kira said, her voice carrying clearly across the meadow, "to stand beside you, not behind you. To share power, not surrender it. To build with you, not for you." "I promise," Calder replied, "to see your strength as something to celebrate, not control. To value your voice equally with mine. To prove every day that partnership requires courage, not submission." When it came time for the traditional gesture of unity, they didn't kneel to any authority. Instead, they knelt to each other, simultaneous, equal, both choosing to honor the other's worth. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. This was leadership reimagined. Power shared, not hoarded. Respect given freely, not demanded. "By the authority vested in me by 6 kingdoms and the Partnership Accords," Aldrich declared, "I recognize you as co-equal rulers of the Storm Kingdom and Southern Territories, unified in purpose and partnership." The celebration that followed was unlike any royal wedding feast. Warriors from former enemy kingdoms danced together. Women who'd been barred from leadership positions compared notes on governance strategies. Even Theron seemed genuinely happy, having brought a delegation of Blackclaw women who'd formed a council to oversee his kingdom's transformation. "This is remarkable," he told Kira during the feast. 6 months ago, I would have called this chaos. Kingdoms mixing, traditional hierarchies dissolving, women in positions of authority. And now I see it's not chaos at all. It's order built on different principles. More complex, yes, requiring more communication and compromise, but stronger because of it, not despite it. He paused, something like regret flickering across his features. "I was wrong, Kira. About so many things. About what strength means. About what leadership requires. About what kind of partner would have made me a better king. You're learning," Kira said gently. "That's what matters. Not that you were raised in broken systems, but that you're willing to break them and build something better. With help." Theron gestured to a striking woman in Blackclaw colors talking animatedly with Sarah. "Commander Lissa. She's been teaching me that female warriors aren't less capable than male ones. They've just never been given the same opportunities to prove themselves. And I've made her co-commander of the Blackclaw military forces. First woman in that position in 5 centuries. His smile was self-deprecating. "She's already implemented 3 strategic improvements my all-male command council never thought of." "That's what happens," Kira said, "when you stop limiting your leadership pool to half the population." As the feast continued, Kira found herself pulled into conversation after conversation. Delegates wanting to discuss treaty implementations, warriors seeking advice on building coordinated units, women from traditional kingdoms asking how to start advocating for change in their own territories. "Overwhelming?" Calder asked, rescuing her from a particularly intense discussion about succession laws. "Exhilarating," Kira corrected. "This is what we fought for. Not just our personal happiness, but this, kingdoms actually changing, people actually believing partnership is possible. Dance with me?" He offered his hand. "Before someone else needs your diplomatic wisdom." They danced under the stars, surrounded by celebrating warriors, and for a moment everything else fell away. Just the two of them, moving together, perfectly in sync. "I have something for you," Calder said quietly. "A wedding gift." He pulled out a worn leather journal, its pages filled with careful handwriting. "My mother's journal," he explained. "Her private thoughts about leadership, partnership, the world she wished she could have built. I've been reading it since we got engaged, and..." His voice caught. She would have loved you. She would have loved this. Everything we're building, everything we're changing, it's what she dreamed of but never thought possible. Kira took the journal with reverent hands, recognizing the gift for what it was. Not just a book, but a legacy passed from one woman who'd fought against limitations to another who'd broken through them. "I'll treasure this," she said, "and I'll make sure her dreams continue becoming reality." "You already are." Calder pulled her close. "Every kingdom that adopts partnership principles, every warrior who learns to fight as a unit, every woman who steps into leadership without having to kneel. That's her legacy and yours intertwined." As midnight approached and the celebration showed no signs of slowing, Aldrich found them at the edge of the festivities. "I have news," he said, his expression serious despite the festive atmosphere. "A delegation from the Western Kingdoms has arrived. They've heard about the partnership accords and want to negotiate joining the alliance." "The Western Kingdoms," Calder repeated. "They've been isolationist for decades. If they're reaching out, then the movement is spreading beyond anything we imagined," Kira finished. She looked at her father, at her husband, at the warriors celebrating around them. "This is bigger than us now, isn't it? Bigger than 6 kingdoms and 1 revolutionary princess. This is becoming something that could reshape how the entire world thinks about power and partnership." "Which is terrifying and exciting in equal measure," Aldrich agreed. "The question is, are you ready for what comes next?" Kira thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, fleeing a throne room in tears, convinced she'd destroyed everything. Thought about the warriors who'd taught her to fight together, the prince who'd shown her what partnership really meant, the kingdoms learning that strength came in many forms. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "We're ready. Because this isn't about one person or one couple anymore. This is about proving that another way is possible. That leadership can be based on inspiration instead of intimidation. That partnership is stronger than dominance." She took Calder's hand, drawing strength from his presence. "Let's meet with the Western delegation. Let's expand the alliance. Let's keep building until every kingdom knows there's an alternative to systems that require half their people to kneel." "Tomorrow," Calder said firmly. "Tonight we celebrate. We honor everyone who made this possible. We remember what we're fighting for." "And what are we fighting for?" Aldrich asked with a knowing smile. Kira looked around at warriors from former enemy kingdoms dancing together, at women in positions of authority, at Theron laughing with female commanders who challenged his thinking, at Sarah coordinating celebration logistics with Ben and a dozen other warriors who'd learned to fight as one. "We're fighting for this," she said simply. "For a world where partnerships like ours aren't revolutionary, they're normal. Where strength doesn't require submission. Where everyone gets to stand tall. Then tomorrow," Aldrich said, "we keep fighting. But tonight," he pulled his daughter into a crushing embrace. "Tonight, I celebrate the woman you've become. The leader you've proven yourself to be. The revolutionary who refused to kneel and changed the world because of it." As the celebration continued into the small hours of morning, as kingdoms that had never cooperated before now danced together under the stars, as warriors who'd learned to fight as units celebrated the marriage that symbolized everything they'd been building, Kira realized something profound. She'd thought her story was about refusing to kneel, about one princess standing firm against impossible pressure, about personal pride versus political necessity. But it wasn't. Not really. It was about recognizing that some principles were worth fighting for, that systems could be changed when enough people believed in something better. That true strength came not from forcing others down, but from lifting each other up. And most importantly, that sometimes the worst thing that could happen, rejection, humiliation, losing everything you thought you wanted, could actually be the best thing if it led you to discover who you really were and what you were truly capable of becoming. Standing in that meadow with her partner, surrounded by allies, watching kingdoms transform around them, Kira Stormborne finally understood what her mother had tried to teach her all those years ago. Strength wasn't about never bending. It was about choosing carefully what you'd bend for, and standing absolutely firm on the principles that mattered most. She'd chosen to stand firm on partnership, on equality, on the radical idea that leadership didn't require anyone to kneel. And in standing firm, she'd built something extraordinary. Not just a marriage, but a movement. Not just an alliance, but a revolution. Not just one woman's victory, but a blueprint for transforming how kingdoms thought about power itself. The work wasn't done. Wouldn't be done for generations. There would be resistance, setbacks, kingdoms that refused to change. But tonight, surrounded by proof that change was possible, Kira allowed herself to simply celebrate, to dance with her husband, to laugh with her allies, to dream about the future they were building together. One partnership at a time, one kingdom at a time, one warrior at a time, learning that standing together was stronger than standing alone. Chapter 12. 5 years after the wedding, Kira stood on the balcony of the Partnership Council Hall, watching the sun rise over a transformed world. "Mama," a small voice called from inside. "Mama, come see." Kira turned to find her daughter, 4 years old and already fierce, racing toward her with a wooden practice sword. "Look, Uncle Ben taught me the defensive formation. I can fight as a unit now." "Show me," Kira said, kneeling to bring them eye to eye. Her daughter demonstrated the basic coordination techniques, her movements clumsy but enthusiastic, already understanding that strength came from working together. "That's excellent, Luna," Calder said, appearing with their son balanced on his hip. "But remember, coordination first, individual glory second," Luna recited dutifully. "I know, Papa. That's what makes warriors strong." Kira watched her children, a daughter named for the moon that had witnessed her grandmother's wedding, a son named for Calder's mother who dreamed of a different world, and felt the weight of everything they'd accomplished. "Thinking about the future?" Calder asked, settling beside her with their son. "Thinking about the past 5 years," Kira corrected. "About how much has changed." And it had. The partnership accords now included 15 kingdoms. Women held leadership positions across the known world. Coordinated military training had become standard practice. Marriage ceremonies no longer required anyone to kneel unless they chose to. The revolution they'd started in that meadow had spread like wildfire. "Report from the Eastern Kingdoms," Sarah said, joining them on the balcony. "They've officially outlawed forced submission in marriage ceremonies. That makes 12 kingdoms with updated marriage laws." "And the resistance?" Calder asked. "Still there. The Traditional Alliance." Sarah's voice dripped with contempt for the coalition of kingdoms that refused to modernize. "Is gaining members in the far territories. They're calling our principles weak, claiming we're destroying centuries of stable hierarchy." "Let them," Kira said calmly. "History will judge which kingdoms prosper. The ones built on mutual respect or the ones requiring half their population to diminish themselves." A messenger arrived, bowing quickly. "Your Majesties, the Western Queen has arrived for the council session. She says it's urgent." Queen Mara of the Western Kingdoms looked exhausted when they met her in the council chambers. Her territory had joined the partnership accords 3 years ago, but the transition hadn't been smooth. "We're facing a challenge," she said without preamble. "My son, my heir, has fallen in love with a common warrior. A woman with no royal blood, no political connections, nothing to offer except skill and courage. And," Kira asked carefully, "and my council is demanding I forbid the match. They say the future king can't marry beneath his station, that partnership principles don't extend to allowing royalty to choose commoners." She looked between Kira and Calder with something like desperation. "I believe in what we're building. I believe leadership should be based on capability, not birthright. But if I allow this marriage, I'll lose half my council. There will be revolts, possibly civil war. And if you forbid it," Calder asked gently, "then I prove the traditionalists right, that our principles are just pretty words, that when it comes to real choices, we're no different than the old hierarchies." The council chamber fell silent as everyone grappled with the complexity of the problem. "There's no easy answer," Kira said finally. "This is the hard part of revolution, taking principles and applying them consistently even when it's costly." She moved to sit beside Queen Mara. "5 years ago, I was told to kneel to preserve peace, to compromise my principles because the cost of standing firm would be too high. I refused, and yes, it led to conflict. But it also led to this, 15 kingdoms proving that partnership works. You're saying I should allow the marriage. I'm saying you should ask yourself what kind of kingdom you want to build. One where love and capability matter, or one where bloodlines matter more than character. But the civil war might happen," Kira acknowledged, "or might not. But if you compromise on this, you tell every common-born warrior in your kingdom that they'll never be good enough. You tell your own son that his choice matters less than tradition. You tell the world that partnership principles have limits." Queen Mara closed her eyes, the weight of leadership evident in every line of her face. My mother would have forbidden it without question, would have arranged a proper political marriage, and never lost a moment's sleep over my son's happiness. But you're not your mother, Calder said. You're building something different, something better, and that requires courage that previous generations never needed. After a long moment, Queen Mara opened her eyes. I'll allow the marriage. I'll tell my council that in a partnership-based kingdom, capability matters more than bloodline. And if there's civil war, then we'll stand with you, Kira said firmly. That's what the accords mean. Not just signing pretty documents, but supporting each other when applying these principles gets hard. The vote was unanimous. The partnership accord kingdoms would support the Western kingdoms' right to allow their prince to marry based on love and capability rather than political necessity. As Queen Mara left to face her council, Theron approached. She's brave, he observed. Choosing principle over political convenience. Risking civil war for ideals. She learned from the best, Sarah said pointedly. Theron smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. I suppose she did. Strange how the woman I tried to force into submission became the example that's reshaping the known world. Not strange, Kira corrected. Inevitable. Systems built on subjugation were always going to fail eventually. We just happened to be here when the breaking point arrived. And now, Theron asked, where does the revolution go from here? Kira looked around the council chamber. At leaders from 15 kingdoms, at warriors from dozens of territories, at a world slowly transforming itself. Now we keep building. Keep proving that partnership works. Keep supporting kingdoms brave enough to apply these principles even when it's costly. She paused. And we prepare the next generation to carry this forward. Luna burst into the chamber, wooden sword raised. Mama, the trainer says I'm ready for unit exercises. Real ones, not just practice. Real unit exercises at 4? Calder asked skeptically. She's been training since she could walk, Sarah pointed out. And she's better at coordination than some adults I know. Watching her daughter beam with pride, Kira saw the future they were building. A generation that would grow up assuming partnership was normal. That would find the old systems of dominance as strange as Kira now found them oppressive. What are you smiling about? Calder asked as they watched Luna demonstrate her formations for impressed council members. I'm smiling, Kira said, because I'm watching the future prove that everything we fought for was worth it. Luna doesn't know what it means to kneel except by choice. She doesn't understand why gender or birthright should limit capability. She sees partnership as normal because that's the world we've built for her. And when she faces resistance, when she encounters kingdoms that still practice the old ways, then she'll have what we had, principles worth fighting for, allies who stand together, and the absolute certainty that some things matter more than political convenience. As the council session concluded and kingdoms dispersed to implement new policies, support the Western Kingdom's transformation, and continue the slow work of building a better world, Kira found herself back on that balcony with Calder. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. That moment in the throne room when you refused to kneel? Sometimes I wonder what your life would have been like if you'd just compromised. Kira thought about it seriously. Thought about the woman she might have been. Queen of the Blackclaw Empire, living a comfortable life built on quiet diminishment, never knowing what she was capable of. Not for a second, she said firmly. That moment, that choice, led to everything. To finding you, to building this alliance, to changing how kingdoms think about power itself. She leaned against him, watching the sun set over a world they'd helped transform. I was so scared that day, convinced I was destroying everything, that my pride would cost thousands of lives. But what I couldn't see then was that some costs are worth paying. Some principles are worth standing firm for, no matter what. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's when it matters most. When everyone says to compromise, to bend, to accept that change is impossible, that's when standing firm means the most. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching kingdoms that had once been enemies now cooperating. Warriors who'd once competed now training together. A world slowly learning that strength came in many forms. Tell me something, Calder said. When you're old and gray and watching our grandchildren rule these kingdoms, what do you want them to remember about us? Kira considered the question carefully. I want them to remember that we refused to accept that the way things had always been was the way they had to stay. That we saw broken systems and had the courage to break them further rather than trying to fix them from within. She turned to face him. But mostly, I want them to remember that true strength isn't about standing above others. It's about standing with them. That partnership isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of courage. That the revolutionary act isn't conquering or dominating, but choosing to build something better together. That's a good legacy, Calder said softly. It's our legacy. Yours, mine, every warrior who chose to believe partnership was possible even when everything said otherwise. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, as their children played below with warriors from multiple kingdoms, as the Partnership Council Hall glowed with light and hope and possibility, Kira allowed herself to feel the full weight of what they'd accomplished. She'd been a princess who refused to kneel, and a king who learned that true alphas inspired rather than intimidated. Together, they'd built something extraordinary. Not perfect. There were still kingdoms that resisted, still warriors who believed the old ways were better, still countless challenges ahead. But possible. Provably, demonstrably possible. You know what the best part is? Kira said. What? This isn't our story anymore. It's everyone's. Every warrior who fights as a unit. Every woman who steps into leadership. Every kingdom that chooses partnership over dominance. Every couple that builds a marriage on equality rather than hierarchy. She smiled, feeling the profound satisfaction of knowing they'd started something that would outlast them. We were just the spark. The moment when one woman said no, loudly enough that others heard. But the fire, the real revolution, that belongs to everyone who chose to believe a better way was possible. To everyone who refused to kneel, Calder added. And to everyone who learned to kneel by choice, with love and respect, rather than from force and fear, Kira corrected. Because that's the real revolution, not eliminating all hierarchy, but making sure it's chosen, not imposed. As the night deepened and stars filled the sky above kingdoms learning to cooperate, above warriors training together, above a world slowly transforming from the inside out, Kira and Calder stood together on that balcony. Partners, equals, co-rulers proving every day that strength came from standing together, not from forcing others down. The warrior princess who wouldn't kneel had found an alpha who learned to kneel with her. Not in submission, but in partnership. Not from force, but from choice. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to honor each other's worth. And in doing so, they'd built a legacy that would echo through generations. A legacy of partnership over dominance, of inspiration over intimidation, of proving that the hardest kind of strength was the courage to build something better than what you'd inherited. Some revolutions happened overnight. This one would take generations. But standing there, watching the world they'd helped create, Kira knew with absolute certainty. It was worth it. Every hard choice, every costly stand, every moment of refusing to accept that the way things were was the way they had to stay. All of it worth it. Because sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to kneel and building a world where no one has to.